As they were ramping up to wrap up their Infinity Saga, the Marvel Cinematic Universe seemed more on fire and more focused than ever when they entered Phase 3. So today, we are going to rank all 11 projects that was released in Marvel Cinematic Universe's Phase 3 from the worst to the best. In last place, Captain Marvel. And when this film first came out, a lot of it had borrowed hype from Infinity War as they sandwiched this one between Infinity War and Endgame, ending Infinity War with Nick Fury dusting away, hitting that pager and showing the Captain Marvel logo. And in a lot of ways, this movie does just kind of feel like an overly long narrative to show us the backstory of why Nick Fury has that pager in the first place. This is one in the Marvel Cinematic Universe I rarely go back to revisit. I don't necessarily think it's that bad of a film. I do enjoy Brie Larson's performance. I don't like the character of Captain Marvel all that much, though, because the film itself has her not know who she is as a character, so she's very hard to pinpoint. Sometimes she seems like a fun, sarcastic character. Sometimes she seems kind of snarky and a little bit overly powered and self-obsessed. I do like the relationship between her and Nick Fury, and I do enjoy exploring the 90s version of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. All the fun 90s tie-ins within the movie is a lot of fun. I do feel like the movie in some ways breaks MCU canon because Nick Fury in the 90s encountering Skrulls and Captain Marvel makes these scenes in the Avengers feel a little bit odd nowadays.
Last year, Earth had a visitor from another planet who had a grudge match that leveled a small town. We learned that not only are we not alone, but we are hopelessly, hilariously outgunned.
Yeah, I guess he just forgot about his adventure in the 90s with all these alien creatures. Or how about this iconic line from Winter Soldier that holds no weight anymore?
Last time I trusted someone, I lost an eye. Oh, motherfucking!
Captain Marvel is a completely fine, generic Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. It just doesn't have that much that I want to go back to for more. Kicking off our top 10, Doctor Strange. And when it comes to Doctor Strange, I feel like the real star of Doctor Strange is the razzle-dazzle of the special effect of taking these Inception-like concepts and visuals and putting them in a superhero film where buildings are folding in on each other. You've got this kaleidoscope-type visual effects happening while you're setting your action set piece on that landscape. Makes for a lot of fun, and I do like Benedict Cumberbatch in the role of Doctor Strange, but kind of similar to how I feel about Ant-Man in some ways, this one does feel like it is formulaic within the Marvel Cinematic Universe's formula. I don't get all that emotionally attached to Doctor Strange as a character. I have some fun with the visual effects. I like the magic aspect of the MCU. All that stuff is cool, gorgeous to look at, but as a narrative, even the villain here, played by Mads Mikkelsen, really isn't that enticing to me. Doctor Strange, it's fine. I enjoy the visuals, but everything else in it, just kind of middle of the road Marvel for me. At number 9, Ant-Man and the Wasp. And this is just a fun, light-hearted, breezy adventure in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Similar to Captain Marvel, it had the borrowed hype of coming in between Infinity War and Endgame. But this one worked more. What was said at the time was a palate cleanser after coming off of the darkness, the dark ending of everyone snapping away at the end of Infinity War. This film just worked to be a light, breezy, fun adventure after going through all the big high stakes with Thanos. And in that way, I do enjoy Ant-Man and the Wasp. I think that the antics, no pun intended, are heightened from the first film. I think they do a lot more with the shrinking and growing technology and ideas and concepts within these movies. This is basically just a huge, big cat and mouse chase with a MacGuffin that both the bad guys and Ant-Man are trying to get. There's really no high stakes here. Even though the post-credit scene plays heavily into Endgame, this is an MCU movie that feels very inconsequential. And in that way, if we're looking at the MCU as a television show, as a season of television, this is definitely one of their filler episodes. But still a fun ride. Up next, Spider-Man Far From Home. And this is one that, when it first came out, when I first saw this, I loved it. In fact, I even thought that Far From Home was better than Homecoming at the time. But this is now also the Marvel Cinematic Universe movie that has kind of aged the poorest for me, where I still do enjoy mostly the second half of this film when we get into the Mysterio reveal and we got Spider-Man going up against Mysterio. You get some great Spider-Man action sequences. I do enjoy the scenery change up from New York. Seeing Spider-Man in London is really interesting and different than what we've seen before in live action with Spider-Man. But the first half of this movie, I do think, is some of the weakest writing in the MCU. The first half of this movie, where we've got Peter suddenly pining for Zendaya's MJ, feels like whiplash going from the first film to this one, where that relationship was never really established. It didn't really seem like Peter Parker cared at all for Zendaya in the first film. I guess Zendaya became a bigger star at this point, so now there's suddenly a love interest. And even the shenanigans and the humor in this first hour always just felt kind of odd and off to me. The sequence where the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent takes Peter in the back, tells him to strip off his clothes so he can get into his black suit while she's standing there watching.
Sure, it fits fine. I don't really need to try.
Take off your clothes.
Okay.
I think that's some of the weirdest humor the MCU has ever had. It doesn't work for me, and I find that the first hour, really, of this movie is filled with a lot of moments like that. I still think that Tom Holland and Zendaya are adorable together in this. I still enjoy the Spider-Man action. I think that Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio is still great, but there's a lot of aspects of this movie that maybe just as I've gotten older, they don't work for me as well. Up next, we got Black Panther, and I think this movie is really, really good. I really do enjoy the exploration of Wakanda, diving deeper into that world, into that culture. The movie does a really great job of setting up just the atmospheric environment of the world of Wakanda, going into the Black Panther lore. Coming off of Civil War, Chadwick Boseman in here as T'Challa gives a really strong performance. I'll be honest, I enjoyed T'Challa more in Civil War than I do enjoy him here in Black Panther. There's just something about his performance that feels more toned down than it does in Civil War. But then you got Michael B. Jordan in here as the foil of Killmonger. Putting those two guys together, putting their ideologies up against each other, I think creates some really fascinating ideas and concepts throughout the entire narrative, as well as the supporting cast here is all fantastic. Lupita Nyong'o, we got Letitia Wright as Shuri. Everyone that they put around the Black Panther in some ways I feel like outshines the Black Panther himself within this movie, but it's still one of the most immersive worlds, the corners of the Marvel Cinematic Universe of all the franchises that they have. And that's going to bring us to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, which in some ways I like even more than the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, because what James Gunn was able to do, taking these characters into their next chapter, was he was able to dive deeper into the insecurities and the trauma of each character. Not just bringing Star-Lord's dad in here and having him come up with all of those abandonment issues. You've got Rocket's story here as he's paired up with Yondu, which now that we've seen how that concludes in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, how they introduce Rocket's backstory just through the lines of dialogue and the hurt that he displays throughout the story, it leads into Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 very beautifully. But even with the emotion that is poured on top of this movie's also a complete and utter blast. James Gunn's humor here does not skip a beat. It is still the peak Guardians humor that we loved from the first film. I think the visuals are a huge step up. I do feel like this movie does kind of drag a bit in the middle when the characters are literally just kind of hanging out on Ego's planet, just waiting for the third act to happen. But this is still a fantastic romp of an adventure with these characters that we love. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 delivered everything I wanted from a Guardians sequel and more, and I still feel that way whenever I put it on to this day. Which brings us into our top 5, kicking off with Thor Ragnarok. And when Thor Ragnarok was coming out with Taika Waititi taking over the director's chair this time around, they really gave Thor the revamp, the refreshment that he needed coming off of Thor The Dark World. Because the Thor franchise was always never anyone's favorite. Taika Waititi took this character and dialed everything up to 11, creating one of the most fun experiences in the Marvel Cinematic Universe while having some of the darkest things happen with Hela killing off Thor's friends, taking over Asgard, destroying Asgard by the end of the film. You still have all of this fun, chaotic energy happening with Thor and Hulk and Loki on Sakaar, introducing Valkyrie into the gang, Jeff Goldblum popping up in here. It's a wacky, crazy, just out of this world adventure with Thor that we've been waiting to get ever since the first Thor in 2011, and it just, the Taika Waititi magic over the skin of the Marvel Cinematic Universe formula, it just made this movie work and stand out as one of the most unique and fun experiences in the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. At number 4, Spider-Man Homecoming. This was a real challenge for Marvel because they already had 2 Spider-Man franchises at Sony that told the origin story of Spider-Man. They were bringing him into the MCU and they needed to do something different with the character, and that they did, bringing him down to a high school level, starting him off on a street level adventure, throwing Iron Man in there as a mentor for Spider-Man. But what I really love about Spider-Man Homecoming, it is a coming of age story with a Spider-Man skin on it, as Peter Parker is trying to navigate high school and the hero life with Spider-Man, while also kind of accepting that he doesn't need to rush into the hero life. He can enjoy high school. I think that this has a fantastic Spider-Man message within it, with a fantastic performance by Tom Holland. Of course, Robert Downey Jr. making his appearances in the film as well. They found a way to put the Spider-Man character into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, make him feel completely different from the Spider-Man that came before him, while keeping the essence of who Spider-Man is intact. Getting into our top 3, we've got Captain America Civil War. And this is one of the first movies where I can remember feeling the anticipation for a movie to come out. You've got the faces of the MCU, Iron Man and Captain America, and you're pitting them up against each other, while also throwing a bunch of other Avengers into the mix. But at the same time, they keep this movie grounded in Captain America's perspective, as they keep the relationship of Captain America and Bucky at the forefront of this entire movie. That keeps it from feeling overcrowded and overbloated, while also accomplishing being a follow-up to Age of Ultron and the events that took place there, setting up a Black Panther movie, setting up a next Spider-Man movie. The movie has so much placed on its shoulders, and it never buckles at the knees. On top of all that, the compelling argument for the Sokovia Accords from Iron Man's perspective and Captain America's perspective is still a debate that fans are having today of which side was right. The way that they were able to write this conflict and not making it so black and white to which side was right is what keeps this movie still so compelling to this day. That conversation is still alive. Plus, it's got some of the best action sequences in the entire MCU, capping off with the phenomenal airport battle in the middle of the film. When I first saw that in theaters, when I saw Spider-Man fighting Ant-Man, fighting Captain America, fighting Iron Man, I thought my mind was absolutely going to explode. I'd never seen anything like it on the screen. Our heroes pitted up against each other, but yet this movie's still able to be fun. It is so consequential to the MCU, to Tony and Iron Man's characters, and where it ends up leading us in Infinity War. The movie had so much it needed to accomplish, and it accomplished it all in aces. And that brings us to our runner-up, and that is going to be Avengers Endgame. Talk about a movie that had a lot on its shoulders. Endgame is definitely the movie of a lifetime for me. This was the most hyped I had ever been for a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. For a movie in general, this was my most hyped ever. You had to be there at the time. Waiting that year between Infinity War and Endgame was so torturous. The theories, the speculation, there was so much of it all over the internet. It was almost impossible for this movie to live up to all of the hype that it had upon it. And by golly, did they pull it off. Because Avengers Endgame doesn't just satisfyingly complete the journey that we took from Infinity War, bringing the characters back, giving our core Avengers one final mission that seems impossible to accomplish, but it's able to also pay homage to the last 22 films of the MCU that led up to this conclusion of the Infinity Saga. There are lines of dialogue in here. There are visuals in here. There are character moments in here that tie all the way back to MCU movies from Phase 1 in Phase 2. It makes movies like Thor the Dark World that are just so low on a lot of people's lists and gives them a lot more merit because this movie does more to enhance those previous movies. And aside from just being an epic conclusion to this 23 movie arc, it also does so much to tie up the endings of our lead characters, specifically with Iron Man and Captain America. A lot of people call this fan service the movie, but I think that that is undercutting it so incredibly, for this is such a meticulous piece of filmmaking. There's so much attention to detail in Avengers Endgame that by the time you get to that final big Avengers Assemble battle where the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe comes onto the screen, the word earned doesn't even begin to describe the feeling that you get. This, like I said, is the movie of my lifetime. This is a once-in-a-lifetime experience as far as I'm concerned. Could not be more grateful this movie exists, and could not be more grateful I was there to witness it. But that brings us to number 1, which is going to be Avengers Infinity War. This was a cinematic experience like nothing I had had before it. Even a year prior to this movie coming out, there was concept art put out there of Thor standing next to Rocket, and I remember being about 16, 17 years old, just tearing up at the concept, that we could see Thor and Rocket together on screen. The fact that they took all these characters that I loved and put them together in one movie in ways that I never could have anticipated. Seeing Iron Man teamed up with the Guardians of the Galaxy, seeing Black Panther, Captain America sharing the screen in Wakanda together. All of these moments in Infinity War are just these special little experiences in and of themselves, but then they tie it all together with this narrative which is central on the character of Thanos. And because they're able to keep Thanos at the core of this story, the story never gets too messy, it never gets too overbloated. The balance is there, as it should be, to make these characters work together, the story work together. It's an epic in scale, intergalactic to the earthly realm. It goes all over the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Every inch of it that we had been discovering throughout these movies, we get to go back to in a more grand and epic scaled adventure. And then you give us this generation's Empire Strikes Back as our heroes lose, half of them dust away. We're left in tears and you just say, see ya in a year. I love this movie. I get goosebumps every time I go back to watch this movie. It is a cinematic achievement in the sci-fi fantasy superhero genre. I love it. I love it. I love it so much. It's my number 1 favorite of Phase 3. If you like videos like this, I've been ranking each phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You can check it out in a playlist right up there, or you can go right down there and check out my latest video on the channel. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for hearing me out. Don't just watch movies, talk movies. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.